I hope you don't have election fatigue. I know we just had a big one and we're all feeling pretty good right now, but the midterms cometh, and that right soon. They are almost here. The primaries are already going to start gearing up, and traditionally, the party that holds the White House loses seats during the midterm. That is the very traditional way of thinking about politics in this country. It's gone that way almost every single time. So joining me now is somebody, I don't call very many people elections experts, but Seth Keshel most definitely is. He's got a Substack that's awesome, Captain K's Corner, because he's a former Army captain, Afghanistan veteran. Okay, Seth, you put out a guide, way too early guide for the 2026 midterms. How are we looking?
You already said it. Political science tells us that we're going to face some major headwinds. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't play it. My dad always told me that you play the games for a reason. And 3 times since the New Deal political coalitions began, we're talking 1934, the president's party has gained seats in the House. So 3 out of 23 midterms, the president's party has gained. That happened most recently in 2002. But the average loss for the president's party in the House is 27 seats on average. Now, there was a very bad loss for Republicans in 2018. Biden managed to only lose 9 seats. But, if we lose 27 seats, then the swing is going to be 54. It's going to be a Democrat House majority of 242 to 193.
Okay, so how do we lose? Like, how do we avoid that kind of loss? Because that would be horrible.
So we've got a little bit of help. As the end of my article starts to bring up, the Democrats know they're losing ground, especially in the Midwest. Now, that may be more pertinent to Senate races and for the 2028 presidential race. But you've already got Gary Peters deciding he's not going to run for re-election to the Senate, and Tina Smith in Minnesota. Peters is from Michigan. But Smith in Minnesota is not running for Senate re-election either, and both of those seats should be Democrat holds in a normal midterm year. But all the party registration numbers continue to accelerate in a Republican trajectory. If you remember our talks before the election, I was using voter registration by party to accurately peg that election, which I got all 56 races right. So we can buck this trend, number one, by letting the enemy continue to make the mistakes, just like Napoleon said. Number two, identifying which races are most critical that we hold and selecting good candidates for primaries. I use North Carolina as a good example. A lot of people are frustrated with Tom Tillis, who's usually one of the weaker Republican senators that we have. I do expect him to be hardcore America first the next 2 years. But if he takes on a primary challenger, it needs to be one first and foremost. It needs to be one that can win the general. So the risk is unseating somebody who's probably a good fit for a suburbanized general electorate and replacing him with somebody who may not win, like Mark Robinson. But really, in the Senate, there's only 2 seats I'm concerned about that Republicans hold, and that's North Carolina and Maine. So I don't see any way Trump's second half of his term will have less than 52 Senate seats.
Okay, well, at least there's that. Speaking of mistakes Democrats make, I turn on the television every single day, or more accurately, social media, and I see one Jasmine Crockett.
And we know, this isn't me trying to throw shade. These are just the facts. Mm-hmm. When you look at who's voting for who, the less educated folk, and when I say educated, I'm not even talking about formal education. I'm talking about people that literally don't want to read and enlighten themselves on facts. Mm-hmm. Those are the people that typically vote for the Republicans. And it's one of the reasons that we have to stop writing in theses as Democrats, right? Mm-hmm. We want to give you every single little detail that we can find so that you can have all the information. But the reality is that the average person that is going out there and voting, they're not paying attention to that.
Seth, am I outside of my mind to think that she is just absolutely wonderful for us, and I smile every time I see her on television?
Absolutely. She belongs on a Mount Rushmore of elected Democrats that really do great service for Republican candidates. Now, unfortunately, some of them have been primaried out by Democrats who recognize the strategic danger they pose to their own party. But, just as soon as they got rid of Cori Bush, we've got Jasmine Crockett becoming a prominent name on the left. So she'll probably continue to return to Congress as long as her district remains drawn as it is. But she will also continue to drive suburbanites back to the Republican Party. She'll probably further piss off minority males who went to Republican candidate Trump in bigger numbers than they've gone probably since 1972 for Richard Nixon. So I'm with you on that we have a lot of people like that. We need to continue to give a microphone.
Let's rewind a little bit, Seth, because there's something I am curious about, and I know many people are. How did we win this amazing election in November? Donald Trump even won the popular vote. It really felt like a big sweep, yet our majority in the House is not very big. Those two things don't add up for a lot of people. Can you break that down for us?
Absolutely. Now, number one, we have the organic reasons why that would be so. Now, Donald Trump is one of the most famous people on the planet since the time of Christ. Now, that helps him probably get several million, 5 or 10 million votes more than a standard Republican would have gotten. And a lot of times when minorities or people that don't belong to a party start voting for a new party, that transition doesn't follow for the whole ticket. It might go at the top of the ticket. So a lot of the people that became 90s and 2000s Republicans went over for Reagan, but it took them a while to buy the whole ticket. So we have some of that going on. And that can explain some of the down ballot issues with states like New Jersey or New York, for example. But then we also have the issues with our election laws. Now, automatic voter registration, expanding vote by mail to universal, and authorizing ballot harvesting with an extended early vote period, those things go hand in hand with guaranteeing that a state will appear in blue state status. What do I mean by that? Well, you have New Hampshire is the only state that Harris won that doesn't automatically register voters. So Trump won non-automatic voter registration states 248 electoral votes to 5. So once you start corrupting the voter rolls and dishing out mail-in ballots, you have opportunity to go all the way down ballot. I think 3 or 4 Senate seats are very questionable: Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and possibly even Arizona. And then you look at the U.S. House. Well, we have courts that are getting involved in redistricting, and they're going after Republican states supposedly on racial grounds. Now, we lost a seat in Alabama and another one in Louisiana. They were both solid Republican-held congressional seats, and those flipped. And then, of course, the opposite happens where nobody breaks up the gerrymanders in the blue states. And then we have the blue state redraws that are different from the past decade when Trump went into office with more than 240 House seats. So our ceiling is a lot lower than that. And then you combine the states that have reckless election laws. Some of the races like Maine, 2nd Congressional District, really stand out to me. And of course, the seats in California that flipped in December. Honestly, any candidate claiming a seat in December should really be hesitant to celebrate that publicly. It was really an embarrassing thing. And any Republican to concede a race like that has no business even running for office.
Seth, talk to me about Trump's plan or the plan we hope he has for some new arrivals, Africans?
So we have the Afrikaners, the South Africans. Now, not all white South Africans are Afrikaners. So we're talking about those primarily of Dutch, but also French and German ancestry who historically have controlled and owned the farmlands. They are now coming under the heavy fist of the South African government, which has passed laws that would allow the government to confiscate their farmlands without compensation. So you have the Trump administration rolling out ideas to bring them in under refugee status. Now, I commented to your producer that this is right up your alley based on the stuff that you tweet about, because the Democrats have been big on using immigration as a political weapon. Now, you can look at Springfield, Ohio, which really backfired for them there. But in Minnesota, they've guaranteed that within a couple decades that the Somalian population that they've imported into Minneapolis will continue to produce Democrat dividends and probably keep that in the blue column long term. So this population, given that they're mostly Dutch, you can look at Western Michigan as a good example. You're probably looking at least a 3-2 Republican electorate. So if you were to bring in 2.5 million adult Afrikaners, which there's not many more than that to begin with, and turn some of those into voters, maybe 60% into voters, you could lock down certain states depending on where they go to fill in these depopulated industrial areas in northern Pennsylvania, western Michigan, or in Wisconsin. So I think that that's an example, just like Cubans, Venezuelans, and Vietnamese voters who are coming to America to flee from some sort of persecution or tyranny, of people that we should be looking to integrate if we are indeed looking at immigration merit.
Who's the 2028 guy going to be? Excuse me. You think it's going to be JD?
I think it's going to be Vance. You know, a lot of people were on the fence about JD Vance. I polled my audience back in the summer, and about 40% really liked him, and some people didn't like him, and other people were sort of on the fence. But I think that the answer is, you've heard people all the time when they want to debate politics, they'll say, well, I didn't vote for your guy, but I hope I vote for him to be reelected. Well, what they're saying is they hope that the next 4 years for America are good years. So I would say that if anybody other than JD Vance were the nominee in 2028, then that would suggest that these 4 years that Trump is president did not go as planned and have gone completely off kilter to where somebody else even has an opening to run for president. There is the belief that vice presidents are not successful running immediately for president, but honestly, with the exception of Harris, most of those vice presidential candidates have run a pretty solid race. Hubert Humphrey got blown up in 1968, but it was mostly because Johnson was so unpopular he knew he couldn't stand for re-election. But I think that Vance, especially given that he'll only be 4 years into a Republican cycle of presidency, has a very good chance. And my floor for JD Vance is 262 electoral votes. I think he's got all of Trump's 2020 states. I think he's got Georgia, and I think he's got Arizona with the suburban Republican coalitions, which means that he's already on the putting green as far as I'm concerned for 2028 for being elected. Pennsylvania could be tough if it's Josh Shapiro who's the opponent, or Michigan may be tough if it's Gretchen Whitmer, and I am very confident Gretchen Whitmer is going to be in the field in 2028 because she did not express any interest in running for Gary Peters' soon-to-be open Senate seat in 2026, which would be a layup for her.
Seth, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.